Dear friends, a hearty welcome to Torus.tv. In the following minutes of our conversation, we would like to discuss the topic of incarnation cycles and talk to you about it. Life after death is a question that preoccupies many, and for that I have GOR in the studio. And I would like to turn this over to you. Incarnation cycles. You have written much about it and also told us about it. Today we would like to deepen this issue. Life after death. How could one imagine that? Much has been written about it in good and bad books. What is your opinion about it? How do you see it?
Lass uns so rum einsteigen.
Let us start in this manner. As one says, after the election is before the election. It is also the other way. Before the election is after the election. After death is before the birth. With this approach, we can better understand what the issue of incarnation is really about, how a human being is built and how he disintegrates later. Why, what for the whole thing is and how it relates to the self, because the main actor in this whole drama is the self. I have experienced it several times when I ask human beings, what are you when you are not incarnated? They think about it and say, nothing. And do not notice the inconsistency which develops that in individual lives, the nothing brings forth so many different concrete forms. Once you point this out to them, they understand that the relationship between the self, which incarnates, and individual incarnations or persons is like the relationship between the actor and the roles he plays. Or another analogy, professions. You have a certain profession and 3 years later you notice that this does not suit you at all, or it is old hat. You're stonemason and 3 years later you change your creative face and begin to paint pictures. You are always the same human being, but the form of expression is entirely different. Maybe you get a different haircut, you clothe differently, and at some point you discover your spiritual side and become a priest. And then a few years later you think what a stupid company that is disallowing physical love. You leave and you become a shaman. Therefore, totally different forms of expression, but the same entity behind it. And so it is quasi in our incarnation cycles. We are those who incarnate, but we are not the incarnations. Incarnations are individual roles. And here we are before the birth. What we call an individual life is a planned undertaking. The self is the one that plans it. It is not the person which plans. It does not even exist at that moment. Speaking you before the incarnation, and for the self it means two different things. The self is in time and out of time. For the self, all incarnations occur kind of simultaneously, and if we talk in timely expressions about it, the self plans its incarnation, sets fundamental guidelines, what shall occur in this life. Because here is the answer to the question why there are incarnations at all. Due to incarnations, due to individual lives, the self develops, acquires characteristics which it did not have before, develops abilities which it did not have before, and integrates all of that. And this is also related to the question what occurs to the person after death, how this integration of acquired knowledge and abilities happens. But the essential thing is thereby that the self is the human being and the persons are the incarnations, are the Daniels and Emmas. The ones running around us are individual roles, and behind that are great cosmic creative entities which bring this into expression.
Maybe before we again illuminate more deeply these entities which are behind these incarnations, you have now given a small view into this. I would like to go back, because this may also be an important question. I can remember that 10, 15, 20 years ago, The topic of rebirth, of incarnation, was not at all talked about as it is today. When you talk to people today, many have been preoccupied with this topic, have already heard about it at some place or from somewhere else. Maybe we can explore this a bit further. How can it be that exactly at this time it is such an important topic? Because I believe there will be many questions which we will discuss again at the end.
Die genau da noch wieder die Leute wieder mit abholen. Also das ist im Prinzip einfach.
In principle, it is very simple. We live in a time which is a transition time, a time of overlaps. Much of the new epoch is already here and the old is still here. In our Western paradigm, something like incarnations almost does not exist. With the old Greeks, there was a few pieces of information about it, but the whole spiritual tradition assumed a single life. That among spiritual people this has now become somewhat of a matter of course is based on the fact that it is information which will be normal common knowledge in the future. And this trickles in already.
Zu einer gewissen Selbstverständlichkeit wird, ja, unter den Spirituellen. Das liegt daran, dass es Information ist, die zukünftig ein ganz normales Allgemeinwissen darstellt. Und das sickert schon rein.
And so it is with the story about incarnations, with many of our abilities which are still carried out in the old form.
Ausgeübt werden.
We can talk to people at a distance.
Auf Entfernung sprechen.
We still need instruments for it.
Geräte dazu.
We can see things which are miles away from us. We still need television for that. Still.
Wir können große
We can cross great distances. We still need an airplane for that. Tomorrow we will not have all this technology, but we have already exercised all these abilities of the future in the old condition.
etwa in diese Schiene.
Just about like that is this phenomena, why this knowledge, which is not part of our cultural context, will be common knowledge, and that everyone assumes this knowledge to be okay.
Jeder geht davon aus, dass es in Ordnung ist. Es ist also etwas, was man
Therefore, it is something which we can put under the phenomena of an awakened consciousness, that increasingly this information is given to people and more books are written about it. As said, in the meantime, it is a phenomenon in Western Europe which is worthy of discussion, which decades ago has not been the case, possibly in the Far Eastern tradition. But this knowledge resurfaces again. It is already here one time, as you said, and it becomes more and more present. This is also the topic why we talk about these incarnations, why they have certain tasks, why they have to accomplish certain things. You spoke about the acquisition of knowledge. Let us talk about this some more, how it really functions.
was hier bei diesem
Here, with this information and the incarnation circle, by the way, it is very seldom that one talks about an incarnation circle, speaking of a meaningful sequence of incarnations. One hears still little about it. What has transpired and has been established in principle is the information that there are several lives. A great qualitative development, unfortunately, has not taken place. The great context has not been established. Why? What for? What before? What after? There is no context.
Therefore, you mean that the issue of rebirth does not necessarily have anything to do with reincarnation, because the topic of rebirth has become public and reincarnation is the actual term for it. But there is much, much more behind it. Let us talk more about it.
es im Prinzip
In principle, human beings have become satisfied with saying, okay, if I die, I will be reborn.
gut, das ist eine Trost.
Well, maybe it is consolation for many. In Asia, it is a reason for displeasure. They want to leave the hamster wheel. Huh? It's a matter of taste. But
Geschmackssache.
this changes nothing in the fact that they do not see a higher ranking meaning in this circle. But it exists. And you can only recognize it, like in a human life, when you know he has done this for 3 years and that for 5 years and then also this and that and he took a trip and this relationship, etc., etc. The whole netting makes sense. And it is also like that in the framework of an incarnation circle. You can understand why, what for, what was the guideline, which abilities were acquired and what for. You can only understand this if you actually know that there is a meaning and a purpose in this whole development. And the self defines this path, these goals. It is a great game. These are not just small games being independent of each other. Instead, it is a great one which the self carries out within a period of 26,000 years.
Ja, dass das Selbst durchzieht innerhalb von 26.000 Jahren.
I can easily imagine that many people actually will see the meaning of why they are here. What seemed without any sense before, I come into this world and then I die, and that was it. There is much more information behind it. Let us continue. I believe this is the right approach in understanding the meaning, so that I may much better recognize my assignment in this life and also undertake it, once I understand the entire cycle, or fundamentally understand the issue. How the self forms the person, like you say, and again enters new life sections in order to learn.
Lass uns hier andocken.
Let us take off from here, how the self forms a new person.
Du,
You, I, someone not in an incarnated condition. You took a vacation and you say, okay, now back into time, space, a new role, a new game, a new round.
dann hast du
You then have a few non-incarnated selves in your environment, which are your old friends or your old enemies, your sparring partners or your playmates, whosoever. Whoever played the villain, whoever played the good one is beside the point. You have a few old partners, playmates at your disposal. Therefore, you have a meeting, some brainstorming. Okay, people, let us incarnate together. You determine the space, the time, the cultural environment, quasi the epoch, and all of this relates to the individual goals. One person needs this, the other that, the third one needs this experience, and the fourth one needs to acquire a new ability. How do we juggle all of this? One establishes a meta plan. And there are always several involved in this, and it is always the same ones which participate. We do not change partners constantly in our life. We simply come together again and again in different roles, different constellations. So, we sit, so to speak, around a table and establish a plan for several incarnations, which more or less occur simultaneously. Maybe sometimes shifted in time. If they shall be your physical parents, they just have to incarnate 20 to 30 years ahead. And if someone shall be the child, one just has to wait 20 to 30 years for the self. This is no problem. In any case, there is a common plan, and also a common goal, and individual goals that are embedded in it. It is a complex something. And then one starts to jump in. What does it mean to jump in? With the selves, which want to be as your parents and agree with it? In most cases. Not always. With advancing age as a self, one does not arbitrarily jump in. Young selves may also jump in, hit or miss, and might say, gosh, where have I gotten here? Suppose you have done it cleverly. You've chosen people which have already materialized before, and now it is your turn.
Du hast die Leute gewählt, die sind vor dir dann schon in die Materie gegangen. Dann bist du dran. Die sind dazu da, dir deinen
They are there to build your body.
Anteilen von ihrem Körper.
With parts from their body, the process began,
Der Prozess.
and you are the one to direct this.
Derjenige,
In the end, you are the one, you are still the self. You still do not have a person yet. And the self has three parts. The informative part, named spirit, the energetic part, named soul, and the material side called subtle body, or sometimes also referred to as light body.
ist dafür zuständig,
This last part is responsible for building your physical body in a foreign body, your future mother's. You do this in her body. She does not do this. Each human being builds its own body according to one's own parameters. When this has already been far advanced, your soul begins to build the psyche of your future person. Feelings begin to take place in this body. Much later, actually already after birth, begins the building of the intellect. Then spirit jumps in and starts to build the intellect, the carrier of spirit in this incarnation. So incarnation is a gradual process. It is not the moment of conception. It is not the moment of birth. In the end, it takes months and partially years until the incarnation is fulfilled. During this time, when the person is still being built, the self has the right to go back. just like with a purchase. Without giving a reason, within 2 weeks you can return the purchased goods. Also here, the future child, which is not yet a child, can say, no, something is not fitting here. Or the selves of your parents say, it's still too early, 3 years later would be better. Then you say, okay, we can then abort the project now and I will come again. Now it does not fit. Often the timing is not okay, or the circumstances of the parents. It is often so that the same entity comes again at a more appropriate time. And even if not, there are children who go earlier. There are bad roles which last too long, and there are also short appearances which fulfill its sense quickly. There are lives which are planned as very short lives. It is no mistake then. We consider it a mistake because it has not lasted for 70 years. There are short lives which nonetheless have their validity. For example, you have planned to quickly accomplish something, but already 3 years later you incarnate somewhere else. This was the plan, this was the agreement. You come in, you finish something, have brought in some information or some energies for your parents and have left because you have something else to do. This is not a mistake, but often will be seen as a tragedy. This is the sorrow of human ignorance and unsuspectingness, when much occurs correctly where we see nothing but mistakes.
Maybe we can lift the veil of disappointment a bit, because the knowledge is simply here how to deal with it. How one can also eventually integrate this in one's life. It is certainly not possible for everyone, but it is good that we talked again about this issue.
Maybe at this point I can give some advice. If someone has encountered the above, of course feelings are connected with it, which are valid, obviously. There are no mistakes in feeling. Mistakes in thinking, yes, but no mistakes in feeling. The feelings are correct. But if a mistake in thinking comes in, that it is wrong, and reproduce something which has already been experienced, then this becomes a senseless infinite loop. One can connect with the entity which was incarnated with you, on the level of the self, and communication may be established. You can ask why and what for, and this simply dissolves many questions.
Good that we have talked about this. In any case, it was a good impulse. How does this continue? We have built it, the information, let us stay with it. It is about to go through several incarnations, draw information from them, if I understand you correctly, and later on to integrate it in the self.
Yeah, exactly. And here is the point. You have finished your life, the essential portion of what the self has determined has occurred, which is mostly the case. The person decides how and when and with how much pain it happens, but what has been determined does take place in most cases, and this is a competence of the self. Okay, the life is over, now the personality is being dismantled. At first, the physical body is disposed. The person remains as a dual aspect, psyche and intellect. Speaking, the person is still here, but without the body. It can remain in this condition for a long time. This is a relatively stable intermediate state. There is no demand for human beings to exit 3D directly. There are more in the Maya reality than in hyperspace. They have not crossed over yet. They just do not have a body.
Is it what one can call ghosts or demons?
No, these are not demons, they are human beings. Later they will be ghosts once the energy is completely exhausted. Speaking, when this rest personality has completely exhausted the energetic component. In most cases this is after decades or centuries. And then they become ghosts, as for example in British castles in the 15th century. These are still rest personalities, which not only no longer have a body, instead they have also lost their psyche, because it is only the intellect which buzzes around. These incarnations are still not finished. And here we are at the point that the incarnation is still not finished, only the body has been disposed. What occurs next? A human being, if, for example, he has been an atheist, discovers that nothing has changed. The perception is there. He hears, he sees, everything is there. He is in shock and he has no plan B. This is the reason why people also do not understand for a long time that they are really dead, because the perception is there. And the plan has been that the switch is turned off and nothing is there. But everything is. The world is still there. Therefore, he's not really dead, just that he has no longer a body. And then there is another sector. People who have been prepared for a life after death state, mostly due to some spiritual or religious tradition. So let's take a Christian. He has already developed his consciousness. For example, he assumes that he has been a sinner because he has committed this or that crime, and the church, of course, has confirmed 1,000 times. He has listened to all the sermons. He knows quite well, he has even tried, but he is a petty sinner. Whom does he see after leaving the body? He sees demons. They suddenly become visible because he is in a frequency region where they can be seen. Ah, there they come to get me. Yes, and they come to get him. The plan which he unconsciously brings with him begins to be realized. They can attach because he assumes that they have power over him, because he is a petty sinner. Therefore, they have the right to get him and drag him somehow into hell. He cooperates. He does not know that he can send him to hell, just like that. He cooperates because he assumes that everything is as it should be. Therefore, they drag him into this hyperspace area called hell. It is a collective prison in hyperspace. There are infinitely many spaces, and there is indeed a space called hell, which we have collectively created in the Fifth Age. So, they put him there, and they begin to withdraw energy from him, energy of suffering. So he sees his pictures, and in these images suffering is inflicted on him, and he expels this energy. This energy is withdrawn because this is the reason for this hell. The other Christian, who has constantly prayed with his rosary and is dead sure that he is like an angel, he expects that he meets angels. And who comes? Of course, angels come. He goes with them because everything is as it should be. And then he finds what he shall find and what he expects, and everything is okay. And then he begins to sing Hallelujah with the angels. And the first day, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and still a year, and another decade, and in the end, the same thing occurs. Energy is delivered to other hyperspace entities, which we sweepingly consider to be kind, which is not true. There is not this clear separation. There are many diverse hyperspace entities, and many of them are dependent on energy supply from us human beings, which they withdraw in many different manners, because human beings have a great energy reservoir. We are creator entities, which the angels are not, and also the demons are not. And here comes the question. Therefore, is there another alternative besides heaven and hell? Is the only alternative Democrats or Republicans? May I be a non-voter? Yes, you may be a non-voter. You must neither support energy in one direction nor in the other direction. So what would be the alternative? And here we are with the self. You do not go where they tempt or drag you. Instead, you go home. And home is not Jehovah, not Yahweh, not Baal, and not Satan. All these hyperspace entities are foreign entities. They are not creator gods, they are created entities, and they are creations. They have erected their systems, their capture systems in hyperspace, and they grab human beings for thousands of years.
Die haben ihre Systeme, ihre Auffangsysteme und Becken aufgebaut im Hyperraum. Und die schnappen die Menschen seit Jahrtausenden.
And human beings, in their ignorance of real alternatives, go either right or left, without knowing that in between they can go home, into their self, because only then is the conclusion and end of an actual incarnation. Only once the rest personality has arrived in the self is given the possibility that the self can integrate all experiences and all acquired abilities of that life, which has been the aim of the incarnation. Only once when human beings have come home to the self, and we have this mess in hyperspace that many selves here and there, still having unfinished incarnations. One is stuck here, and others is in hell, and other one is in paradise, and the incarnations are still not finished. The whole time, energy is withdrawn from the selves.
Das Selbst wird abgesaugt, die ganze Zeit.
It is very important to understand this game precisely, which now has been unraveled by you, how it really progresses from beginning to end. I can imagine that only after the understanding of these facts it is possible to activate self-determination, if one may call it that, and already decide now that I do not want to go into either direction. We've spent quite a bit of time already, but you had asked me to discuss at the end that we already live in a time when incarnations can take another sequence or receives a different weight. Let us talk about that.
Incarnation, speaking the path through the body of another human being, is the most common but not the only possibility in order to get or create a physical body. There were instances, and it will occur again, where the pattern of the physical body was created due to energizing and condensing, and the quantum jump into matter was accomplished without being born. This was possible, and now it will be possible again. And this is the basis of what we call resurrection, by the way. It is not always that a still not decomposed body can resurrect. There are also decomposed bodies where a human being can resurrect regardless, and this is a direct manifestation. This is the difference. One is another variant, today still an exception, but tomorrow will be an alternative, the direct manifestation.
Morgen wird sie zu einer realen Alternative werden, diese Direktmanifestation. So,
we have now the situation of a transition from the old time, where all the patterns were very much cast in stone, where there was very little wiggle room, in a time when great creativity is developed. It will be multidimensional. We have now a real possibility, many human beings have this possibility, of the transition into another density, to another frequency, into an entirely new intensity, implementing the transition to a plasmatic condition in the old body. Speaking not to dispose the old body and to incarnate again, where new conditions of reality already exist, instead to implement the transition in corpus, in the living physical body. Speaking to install new frequencies in the body, to live through this transformation, which can also be painful at times, and when the cosmic wave comes, which we actually trigger, to make this ecstatic jump into the new intensity, into another density, which from today's viewpoint is the subtle realms, without losing the body. We will thereby cross a boundary, which today is still the boundary between the physical and the non-physical. Tomorrow we will eliminate this boundary. It is the continuation of life in the physical body at a different frequency. The body becomes subtler, more intensive and less dense with higher intensity. And here we are at the most important point. A human being is a whole and complete creator only in the incarnated condition, because in the incarnated condition you are content as well as form. And you have these three principles in you: information, energy and matter. Therefore, all old religions are fundamentally wrong in the assumption that human beings become divine after finishing all incarnations. No, just in physical form is the human being whole and divine.
And due to the change, we can much more experience this in our own body and not only in our imagination. I will remain here and will ride the wave as you say so well. This sounds like a very exciting time, I would say, for all of us, right?
A time full of surprises.
We are looking forward to it, I believe.
It is better to look forward in joy, because joy dissolves fear. Joy, if it becomes really ecstatic, and we need that, provides a lot of energy for this jump to the top of the wave. To ride the wave is now a unique opportunity. It comes soon.
Yes, and I would also like to approach it that there is already a great amount of anticipation. At least for me it is like that. You speak also of new legalities, new physical laws will develop. Who knows what all human beings will be capable of. These are new characteristics which need to be explored. We cannot close the book. Instead we open the next empty page and write our own history in it. This is certainly something beautiful.
To experience the new capacities also in the body, free, and this enormous expansion which the new reality brings with it. This is also a unique opportunity that I can encourage all to dare this jump, to do it, to remain in the body and to perform this transformation in the body, and to assume that, and not that the wave will sweep us away.
Then it is not only an expansion in consciousness, but also a physical expansion. This is, as is said, an exciting chapter, which we may open. Dear GOR, I thank you for a great discussion. Dear friends, I thank you for watching and your attention. At regular intervals we will again present to you new topics. Be well and a good time for you.